Yeah, hey, I want to start this episode by just saying I didn't prep you for this at all, but
No, go ahead.
Laura and I have been planning out some travel lately, and I'm just going to say I've noticed such a huge change since Laura gave her notice in her demeanor, how she shows up in the house. I don't know if you remember this, but like she is just like floating right now, man. And our kid, our youngest is getting ready to go off to college here in a few months, and we've made all those preparations now, and it's like I have my old girlfriend back, man. I'm like dating my wife again. It's been amazing. So I just
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been such a nice shift in our house. So we've been having a really nice time cooking together and planning trips and going on trips and going to concerts. We went to go see a show in the middle of the week last week, and it's been great. So I just wanted to start this conversation by saying that, because I know there's been some months in the past where I've been like, oh, the market's down again and my portfolio this and that.
Right.
Now that I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, I couldn't be more happy.
That's awesome. I'm so glad to hear that. What a good way to start.
So what are we talking about today?
All right. So, I mean, what you've just said there, I think is a great example of how so many of these issues we talk about, there's mechanical elements,
Yep.
Sometimes numbers, and then there's the how things feel and how we respond to them. We're emotional creatures. And, something we haven't returned to in a while that you were asking me about is this idea of withdrawal strategy. And that's a perfect two sides of phi topic, because it fits that kind of niche of like, it's real personal content, but it's also mechanical. And frankly, we get an awful lot of mechanical questions from our viewers. So time to hit on safe withdrawal rate again.
I'm thinking about how to develop my retirement paycheck, and I may have like a little bit of a nuanced situation, which we can talk about, but in general, it is kind of scary to move from that accumulation phase to the decumulation phase. And you've been doing it for a few years now. I imagine your system is pretty well dialed in. Does it still rely on the SWR toolbox by Earn?
It does, yes. And probably a good reminder for us that not everybody listening to this or watching this has heard us say that phrase, Earn's safe withdrawal rate toolbox, before. So if indeed this is the first time anybody is tackling this topic, go check out twosidesofphi.com/toolbox, because we have 3 separate episodes prior to this one. This is our 4th, where we go into the mechanics of the tool. You and I had a conversation about how I use it and how you're thinking about using it, and then also a deep dive into the strategy I suspect we're going to touch on today, which is my variable withdrawal strategy that I use and how I use that very simple free tool to do that. So all the show notes from today are going to end up on that page as well, and it'll just kind of keep building that collection so that people can refer back to it.
So there's various ways to draw down your portfolio, and we've talked about probably all of them in the past. This one is focused more on a, variable percentage withdrawal rate, right? And it's based on using the CAPE ratio, right?
That's right. So based on how the market is performing, one can sum that up using the Shiller CAPE ratio, which stands for cyclically adjusted price to earnings ratio. And we're not going to touch how that is created today, because all of that is in part 3 of that SWR series. But you're right. I am using a variable withdrawal rate strategy as opposed to a set it and forget it, just take inflationary adjustments over time. So yeah, that's what I'm doing.
How do you use it like structurally? Are you opening in this once a month and making a paycheck for yourself? Are you doing it every 2 weeks? Are you doing it every quarter? How does that work?
Good question. So I have a budget, and that isn't really adjusted throughout the year. I try to stick to that, and I revisit it at the end of the year. So That's a somewhat fixed number. And then at the end of every month, I look at, well, how did I actually do versus my budget? In the best case, I come in at budget. I never come in under budget. That's not how it's designed. But if medical goes out of control or whatever, I'll come in over budget.
Okay.
And so I go compare that actual spending to what I calculated for that month in the safe withdrawal rate toolbox. And I say, well, am I under my ceiling, or am I below it, or am I over it? And I track that throughout the year. So it's a once a month exercise. Go into the tool. How is my spending versus my supposed, maximum withdrawal rate?
Okay. So that process starts where?
Okay, so it begins with my budget, which is I still use YNAB. You could just use the spreadsheet, and I just keep track of my spending.
Got it.
And then it goes into Google Docs, which is where I have my own copy of the Safe Withdrawal Rate Toolbox.
Yep.
And every month I go in, I change the number of months left in my retirement. This is the grim part of it. So I just take away a month of life.
Okay.
And then, I change the value of my portfolio.
Okay.
Right. Whatever it is
Yep.
that day. And then I update the CAPE ratio, which Karsten's tool generally does automatically now, but there is a link out to update it manually. And then I see what that withdrawal is, and then where am I at with my spending. So I really only use Google Docs for the whole thing.
So on the general parameters input where you're changing the value of your portfolio, are you getting really granular about your asset allocation, or is rebalancing just kind of a separate part of this? Because a lot of people, when they're generating a paycheck, they're kind of rebalancing at the same time. If you're overweight in one thing, that's an obvious place to rebalance back to your asset allocation. How do you do it there?
Yeah, it's a related but separate activity. So twice a year, my schedule is May and November. I go in and I do my rebalancing, and then that, but that, doesn't, money is fungible, right? So it doesn't necessarily change the absolute value of my portfolio. Just twice a year, I rebalance and sell assets to build up my cash again. And so that's a zero sum activity, but it does change my asset allocation.
Because the reason I ask is because in that spreadsheet, it's as you're doing your long-term projections, you're trying to maintain a certain asset allocation to get the projections to be what you're projecting. And so you're just trying to maintain those within certain bounds, right?
I am,
okay.
Yes.
There's a band.
And in fact, yeah, exactly. And in fact, using a CAPE adjusted strategy, that actual section of the parameters and main results tab where you have your asset allocation doesn't actually impact that, because the CAPE adjusted withdrawal method is basically a snapshot of where you are, where the market is, and taking into account those other parameters to say, and this is the maximum you should take out this month.
Okay, but explain that, because a certain percentage of your portfolio is allocated toward equities.
Of course. And I think what Karsten says is in one of the comments to a reader is, as long as your equities are within 60 to 100% of your portfolio, this kind of strategy makes sense. If you were 100% bonds, well, then, modeling based on that assumptions of CAPE isn't necessarily going to be appropriate. So, maybe VPW or another variable approach, if that's what you want to do, would make more sense. But yeah, you're right. Yes, it isn't influenced by it.
Okay. So CAPE ratio, everything's right there. It's very easy. If you click on this CAPE tab in there, you'll see there are a couple of values, and you have to read through that documentation to see which one you're comfortable using. But it's very easy to make these updates, and you look at it and you see the ceiling. What if you're over the ceiling?
Well, you say what if. For me, it's definitely when. So I would say
happened recently, right?
It did. So in the best case, I have my budget with the current state of the market. My budget ends up being around 15 to 18% below the ceiling in any given month.
Okay.
And I looked back at all of 2023, and that's the range.
Okay.
So in the best month, it stays below that limit. In the worst month, it goes over by as much as 35% one month. That's my dental implant. And so what I do is I actually track that deficit and surplus every month, and I just sum it up over a year, right? Okay. Anything is arbitrary.
Okay.
And I just want to see, how did I come out? And so far, this is my second full year of following that strategy. I've come out below the sum of my CAPE ceiling, not by a ton, right? I'm talking about $5,000.
Okay.
But that feels good to me.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
There is a psychological aspect of this for me. And I don't know if you're going to find the same kind of benefit if you follow it, but I like knowing that, I'm under this month. Okay. Yeah, I'm over this month. That's not great. But then I'm at or below again. And on net, I'm like, well, I guess I'm doing all right, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's actually better than when you and I talked about it. I don't know if this was about a year ago or whatever. You were under withdrawing, the buffers on buffers discussion, and you were under withdrawing by quite a bit.
Yes.
And so it sounds like you made some changes there. Has that improved life? Have you gone out to eat more? Have you done more things?
Yeah, I think I am not even silently sort of micro worrying about all these little expenses. I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't always something I said out loud to anybody else because Lori would definitely call me out on it if I did. But I feel good like knowing, okay, this is the maximum and I don't have to spend to that. But when I do, or when I go over, it really does feel a lot better.
Okay. So
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about how you manage your cash position, because I think this is a question that people have. You know, you have your equity bucket, you got your bond bucket, you got your cash bucket. How do you generate the paycheck actually?
Yeah, so I try to maintain about a 5% cash position, which these days is mostly money markets funds,
Yep.
that are have a 5% 7-day yield right now, let's say, and then some that is what's in my checking, my current month's budget. And so my goal is to maintain that position. And so twice a year when I do that rebalancing exercise, I use that opportunity to sell things that are overweight and then generate cash, which I then have in a separate, portion of my brokerage account. And that's I have an automatic monthly withdrawal that I consider my monthly paycheck that comes out of that fund.
Okay.
And then I use that to populate my budget.
Okay. So you're effectively just spending down the cash every, for 6 months, then you rebalance, you replenish some of the cash, and then you go like that. That's your cycle, right?
That's right. And the only other thing that happens is any dividends that are thrown in my taxable account,
Yep.
taxable accounts, those get pushed into that same account because, I don't reinvest them anymore because I've already paid taxes.
Right.
I'm going to pay taxes on that dividend, so it comes out.
Yep. Okay. Any other nuances I should know about with respect to, kind of transitioning into this?
I think the most important thing, and this is a part of the Cape adjusted strategy these days. If we had done this episode a year ago, it wouldn't be. You really got to think about what are the other cash flows that can come from the time you want to start using this tool to your eventual end of life, right? How long you want the portfolio to last. And so for you, it's about things like not just the things that are going to affect everybody, certainly in the U.S., like Social Security, accounting
Right.
for that,
Yep.
increased spending for healthcare, but also are you going to have any other income from your business or other things? And, you can account for those in the cash flow assist tab, and all those are going to be contemplated in how much you can or will consume, which is the term we want to use when it's about your withdrawals plus other cash.
Right. It's a
So I
safe
think getting that right is
okay.
important.
Yeah, because the terminology here is a little different. It's a safe consumption rate, because that's what effectively the Cape tab is calculating for you, right?
Yeah, and I think, anytime you're using the Safe Withdrawal Rate Toolbox, and he has all kinds of disclaimers in it now that and we made sure we called this out in our tutorial videos too, that it is a safe consumption rate. And that means he assumes if you're getting a $2,000 a month Social Security check, well, that's $2,000 you're not going to take out of your portfolio.
Right.
Right. And so it's the total consumption, and his calculations correctly account for that. But it is something, and especially to someone like you, that's going to be really important, because I imagine, and I'm curious to know what this looks like. You're doing a bunch of modeling as it is, so you've got to be making assumptions on the topics we've been talking about lately about your business and how that income's going to change over time.
Yeah, conservative assumptions. I talked about projecting Social Security and assuming 50% of what we had actually calculated out. If we both draw at 70 and our spouses draw at full retirement age, maybe slightly before then, we assumed 50% of the value of that. And there's ways to calculate that online. And I'm doing the same with the business cash flows. I'm just being really, really conservative. So
now, are you finding this? Like, how does this exercise strike you? Does it give you concern? Like, are you really making sure you're ticking all the boxes, or is it like comfort? Oh, I've been thinking about this long enough. I think I know what it's going to look like. Where do you land on how that feels?
I think I was, maybe a year ago, I was really dialed in on it and paying a lot of attention to it. But, I projected forward in time. I made some projections forward in time a year ago. And as I open it up and look at it today, it's like, well, those were super conservative projections altogether, from a portfolio, future value, and also from, what the business is going to earn. So It makes me comfortable. I mean, I'm totally comfortable with the strategy that we have planned out. What I want to know more about is like, okay, well, what changes do I make in the budget? Like, what are the downstream effects of that? Like, where does this go to? Do I just save more? Do I spend more? Does travel look a little bit different? And so, yeah, I love having the tool because it gives me confidence. But I remember you saying when you were using it, you're a little hesitant at first. And do you think that's just a natural side effect of, starting to draw down the portfolio?
I think that's definitely some of it. I also think, like, for me, even though I had read the whole Safe Withdrawal Rate series that Karsten wrote, and I felt I understood it, it's like when you start using a tool, I don't know about you, but I am looking at all the cross-referencing in the cells. I'm trying to make sure I understand how it works. And I think I really had to just get a little time with it because it is really easy to use. And that's one of the reasons we like it and why we talk about it so much on our channel, because we actually use it. But I think I just had to have enough repetitions on it to feel like, what, this is straightforward. And I think that feeling, like you were just talking about, is what's really important at the end of the day, because you got to be able to sleep well with this. And I think that's one of the reasons some people like the original utility of the tool, which is very much still, I'm sure, the most common use of it. And that's kind of a set it and forget it.
Right.
Like, if based on this portfolio I have, and based on Karsten's historical data, this isn't Monte Carlo, right? And he talks about all the reasons he doesn't want to use that. I can just withdraw at 3.25% forever, adjusting for inflation, I'll be fine. But if you're like us, maybe a variable strategy feels better to you, well then, so I think for me, it was just practice and getting used to that. I don't know. We're all emotional creatures, right?
Yeah. And it's, having done the research and reading ourselves, we look at all the failure of the 4% rule happened when CAPE rate was above 20. So it's like, there is some, isn't that true?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so there is some,
and often well above 20.
There's grounding in that. And look where the CAPE is right now. It's like,
that's right.
What is it, 29 today?
Yeah. It was a couple days ago when I checked it. Yeah, it was like 28.04 or something like that.
So it's just
Karsten's adjusted CAPE.
Right, the adjusted CAPE, which is what you and I both use.
Yep.
But there's reason to pay attention to this, and there's reason not to stumble into this blindly. And if it only takes a few minutes a month or every other month, like in my mind, there's no reason not to use this as just another piece of information. And it seems like for you, it's giving comfort, but it's also fits with your budget. Like it's not like it's constraining you in any way, is it?
I don't think so. And for me, I also think it is still a very personal thing. Like, Lori doesn't want to discuss my latest feelings on the Safe Withdrawal Rate toolbox. She wants to know, is what we said, was appropriate for us to take out? Are we doing that, or are we doing something else? And do we have a problem? Do we have to change something?
Yeah.
And that's an easy discussion. That's as part of our, annual net worth review.
We'll see what happens when we get into another bear market, how it changes it. I mean, the bonus with the CAPE is that it is this kind of smoothing. It adds a smoothing curve to the variable withdrawal rate. It doesn't, if you were to do a fixed percentage rate on a portfolio that dropped 20%, that's going to mean a change in lifestyle for you, probably.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's another reason that I like, a budget that has some gap against it, because to your point, if the market drops 20% and your CAPE adjusted withdrawal rate drops 10%, it's still 10%.
You're right there.
If you're right up against the buffer, you're going to go below now. And you are accepting with a variable strategy that you're comfortable with some movement in either way, but that smoothing is worth something. And,
there goes your beer budget, man.
Yeah. That is in the debauchery bucket, so that's a discretionary.
Discretionary.
Discretionary. I don't know. Is that the first place we take the cut, or is it maybe we don't go out to eat that month?
You get rid of some pets.
The pets have their own budget line item.
I know. It's discretionary though, isn't it?
No, they're not considered discretionary. There's a sinking fund for the pets. You have an aging animal. You know what that's like. It's
start
sinking
to-
fund's a good idea.
You start to feed one animal to the other, maybe. Is that a possibility?
The only animals we have that eat animals eat insects, so thankfully we're okay.
Oh God. Okay.
Would the dog eat the cat? I don't know. Not my dog.
Not your cats, man.
No, my cats would beat up the dog handily.
So we do have some people ask questions about this withdrawal strategy. So you want to work in a few of these here?
Sure.
Okay. Somebody has asked, when and why have or would you pull back spending depending on market or life conditions?
You can't. I believe you can't really know until you're in something. But what I can say is that the last downturn we went through, I didn't change my spending, but I definitely looked at it a lot more closely when I found I was going over. But I'm gonna right now, if I stick to my guns, I'm gonna pull back in response to the model telling me I need to pull back. And so far, I have not had to adjust my budget down because the CAPE adjusted withdrawal amount has not fallen below my budget.
Yep.
So I have some cushion in there, and so far I've maintained it. I have to imagine I'm going to heed what it tells me if things are so far down that I need to cut my spending.
I think this is a good chance to look at the fixed withdrawal rate component of the spreadsheet and use that for your planning purposes. And then it can only get better. But I never want to be in that position where I really have to make some big life cuts. Like I don't want to design the life where like it's going to depend on the market doing well for, the next 10 years or 5 years or whatever, limiting my sequence risk. I mean, that's kind of a scary way to budget. So my answer would be a little different than yours, I guess.
Yeah, that's cool. It's all good. But your point's a very good one. I mean, I think a lot of people, instead of using historical data, we'll just say, because I see them talk about this online when they're talking about using new retirement and other tools, they say like, well, my optimistic assumption is like
Right.
8% return and my pessimistic is 6. Like, well, hold on now.
Yep.
We need to move both of those maybe based on historicals. And, so you're right. If you definitely don't want to just plan for overwhelming success. That's a risky strategy.
Well, here's something that kind of plays into that though. If you look at the baseline assumption in the toolbox for inflation, it's 2%.
Yep.
Is that are we going to be throwing that out pretty soon here?
I mean, you could change it to whatever you want. That's not going to affect a CAPE adjusted strategy, but it will affect the baseline safe withdrawal rate. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. So if you're doing projections, I don't know, it's something to pay attention to.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay. How do you set up an asset allocation for withdrawal? Meaning if you have bonds in a tax deferred account and pulling from taxable first, then having to rebalance it all. Or if markets move a lot, do you pull from your losers if you just have stocks in taxable? So let's talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, at the end of the day, you've said it a variety of times on the show. Money is fungible. I want to have some of everything in multiple accounts just because it makes it mechanically easy. Yes, I keep a large percentage of my bonds in a tax deferred account, but I do have some in my after tax account because it just makes it easier when I have to sell bonds, as I did during the downturn, right? I was overweight in bonds. Now I'm overweight in stock, so it's pretty easy. I wouldn't say I specifically have, made, determinations of, well, this is how I'm going to sell. It's just making sure other than just making sure I have the easy room to do the type of selling and buying that I have to achieve both my rebalancing goals and my cash generation goals.
It's okay to hold those assets even in a non-tax optimized way in all kinds of different funds, whether that's pre-tax or post-tax. Money is fungible. If you need to maintain a certain asset allocation, you're just trading one for the other. That's all you're doing. Yeah.
It's a good question for you. With the end now coming in sight, are you doing anything differently in terms of your asset allocation, or is it just when the time comes up, I'll do that?
No, I am at my target asset allocation, and I'm always kind of trying to maintain that. I've been building more of a cash position. That's something that we talked about, a while ago. And, so that's in place. I'm basically at 5% cash right now. And, I don't see that changing necessarily. It's some of it's going to depend on what the business residuals from the business, and that passive income will affect what I do with that extra money. But yeah, I'm just maintaining the asset allocation that I planned.
Cool.
Oh, the one thing, or if markets move a lot, do you pull from your losers? I wanted to touch on that a little bit. Does that sound counterintuitive to you?
Yeah. You pull from the winners.
From the winners. Yeah.
You don't want to, I don't want to assume I know what that person was asking, but it could read like, well, these assets aren't performing well, therefore I should sell them and replace them with things that will perform better. For me, I know for you, we don't want to make emotions a part of this decision. I have my IPS document to tell me what I should be doing in terms of my assets. So yes, my S&P 500 fund is on a tear, but I have to sell that because it's overweight right now.
Yep.
If two things are equivalently up, and for whatever reason you feel like, oh, I want to sell this more than that one, and both are within your range, like, so be it. You do what you want, right? You feel like selling bonds instead of selling your REITs, and both are overweight, go for it. But
equally, if they're both losers,
yeah,
you may be selling a loser anyway, but it's the one that's losing less.
Right. That's right. You've got to be smart about it.
Yeah. And you may be loss harvesting too. So I don't want to read into that a question more than is there, but pulling from losers kind of struck me like, I'm not sure we want to do that.
Yes.
Okay. So the next question, Jay, how hard is it to mentally change your budget from year to year? Is it hard to actually spend more one year and not be worried about your overall portfolio? So if the Cape says you can spend, 6% of your portfolio this year, I know you've talked about this in the past, being hesitant to do that. Like, if I don't need to, should I?
Yeah, I fear the idea of merely inflating my budget because I can mathematically. Like, yes, it was tough for me to finally own up to the fact that I was under withdrawing and just convince myself it was okay to increase it. And you and I have talked about that. So that was hard. It's not hard for me at this stage to watch the maximum withdrawal rate move around a little bit because as long as it's staying above my budget, I'm okay, right? I have that buffer built in there. I imagine I would answer this differently if I didn't have any space in there and my budget was set to what the current Cape adjusted withdrawal rate is, because then next year, if the market turns down a little, I have to lower my budget. It's not going to feel good, but I also feel okay knowing that I've got areas I can cut from that are discretionary that wouldn't feel too bad, but I haven't had to go through that yet. So, the proof is in the pudding when it happens.
It'll be interesting to see as your portfolio grows, presuming that it's going to, where does the budget change get allocated? Is it travel? Is it quality of life? Is it that another home? Or, those are things that Laura and I are talking about. Like,
well, that's the honest thing, right? I think about that. Like, I'm seeing my portfolio now recover, get back to like its almost all-time high despite withdrawing for 4 years.
Yeah.
And so now I find myself wondering, well, what will it be like in 5 years or 10 years? Yep. And if it is that high, well, what does that mean? Right? What does that mean for the amount of money we have available to spend on things like travel, on legacy for our son, on giving, on whatever, right? We have all these assumptions in mind right now based on our current budget, but none of us knows which of those curves we're going to end up on because we don't have a crystal ball in the market. I do like that little thought exercise of like, well, what would it mean? It's kind of cool. I try not to get too wrapped around that, but I do like that idea.
Well, it just makes me think, like, if you had a year that said, oh, you could spend more, like testing the waters a little bit, going a little bit more luxe on a vacation or getting something else that you have always wanted, like, that'd be kind of a fun exercise to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. This is a pretty common one. I think a lot of people have it, and I had it definitely early on too. How do you factor taxes into your strategy, and how do you account for that in the spreadsheet?
Yeah. So, for sure, the spreadsheet doesn't have a mechanism to account for that because everyone's tax situation is different. Yeah. Carson's answered this like 10 different ways by now. So you've just got to know that your withdrawals have to account for your taxes. And depending on how lean fire or all the way through fat fire you are, that's either going to be a non-issue or a substantial issue. For me in the present, it's been much more towards not so much an issue. If I owe anything, it's on the order of hundreds of dollars. It's not something that I'm really butting up against, but that has to do with the amount of income I'm generating at the current time. If that changes in the future, right? Our spending changes, the market's performing, your basis, whatever that differential is, those gains, that's something you're responsible for from a tax perspective. On the same note, many of us in the fire community are relying on things like staying below the capital gains 0% ceiling, and so that those gains aren't generating any income taxes. Again, this is a very U.S.-based taxation answer.
Right. Yeah.
So, but you do need to think about what you need to be living on, right? What's that money, and then how you're going to generate it, and what that's going to look like from a taxation perspective, whether that's due to RMDs because you're taking from tax deferred accounts, or whether it's taxable funds for those who are before retirement age. You got to figure it out. And I think it's a great opportunity if you're afraid of that and you really want that double check. I mean, talking to a tax professional is probably a pretty smart idea.
I have my own spreadsheet that I run for
Okay.
the business to calculate taxes and our own personal tax picture. So I'm always projecting it all the time. But it's a pretty complicated spreadsheet. So you could see how, this one spreadsheet, it's giving you an overview, but it's naturally going to be general in nature. Like there's no way Karsten could make this free spreadsheet touch everyone's tax situation. I mean, my spreadsheet is many tabs for this.
Is that something you had to custom generate, or
I bought it
to leverage? Oh, this is the thing you bought.
Yeah, I bought it from an accountant. I love it. I love it. Absolutely love it. It's really great. And she updates it every year, and has all the new tax rates and everything. And it's a great way to do your tax planning. And I use it for the business. And I also use an accountant. So. But that's just because I want to be up in that business. But for someone to ask for this spreadsheet to also handle taxes, maybe for a simple tax situation, you can get away with adding just an extra tab in there and doing your own calculations to it. But generally, I think if I don't know what your tax life is like, but mine's pretty complex at this point.
Oh yeah, I mean they couldn't be more different. I mean, this is one of the things that goes along with owning your own business. Is you're responsible for a lot of financial matters, including taxes.
Yep. So Jay, do you ever see yourself kind of just backing off of this thing altogether?
Yes.
Okay.
I wonder when. I mean, I was just kind of thinking as I was preparing for this episode, like, well, okay, there's no reason I'm not doing this quarterly at this point instead of monthly, even though it only takes minutes a month. It's just not required, and I have the comfort. So why not just move it to quarterly? And then I was like, well, at what point will it just be annually? Like if you're not changing that much month to month, you could just accept that, you do it once a year. And, this has come up. People ask Karsten that all the time. I mean, monthly is easy in some respects because of the way the tool is set up, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
So I have wondered, first from a budget perspective, like when do I just get rid of that granular tracking? It's not hard, but it's, a few minutes a day I spend on it. That adds up. And then there's this monthly exercise. I don't know. I guess based on nothing, I would say definitely in the next few years, I see myself backing off.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, like all things in post-RE for you've taken a real close look at it for many months, and then you're like, I don't know if I need to spend time doing this. And it's been fun to watch that evolution, because I always thought of you as being pretty uptight and about your finances, and I'm definitely more loose than you. But now, as I near this kind of transition point, makes sense to pay attention to it. And I think that's maybe a guiding principle for anyone using this. Like if you do have a big life change, and your expenses are changing, and the market's down, it's easy to check in with it, right? And maybe you want to check in with it more often then. But when you're riding high and just cruising along, just have confidence in the sheet and know that you've got the numbers working. I think that's the point where you're at right now.
You said it. I'm going to grab that little soundbite right there and see if I have to use it, a year from now with you, because you are a very thorough individual. You're very detail oriented, and especially once the business income, maybe that's a couple years from now that starts to taper off. I wonder, maybe you'll be so comfortable by then it won't matter, and you'll just be like, this is easy peasy. But man, I'm 4 years out here, and I think I'm finally comfortable with the mechanics of all this. And that's not to wish you anything but great success, but I just know that it's very easy from watching other retirees to, I don't want to say fixate on this stuff, because a lot of them don't seem worried about it, but they're very interested in just keeping an eye on how things are going. And that's not necessarily bad. I think you just gotta, it's gotta be a productive activity, and it makes sense in different ways for me. It'll make sense in different ways for you.
Right on, man. Well, thank you, Karsten, for making this spreadsheet, man. I don't actually know what I would do without it.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of mileage out of other tools for different reasons, right?
Sure.
We loved Seafire Sim, but this thing is a piece of how I live these days. And so, for anyone who's never checked it out before, please go to twosidesoffi.com/toolbox. You'll either be convinced it's a good tool for you, or you'll find something else, but check it out. It's pretty darn nifty.
And you get to listen to Jason's, lulling voice.
Hey, man,
you through the spreadsheet.
Those headless videos perform better than they had any right to. People clearly like them.
ASMR, man. I keep seeing all the ASMR comments on it.
I know people keep telling me I should read audiobooks. I'm like, who wants that nasal of an author? A reader. I don't want that.
It's very in personal preference, man. I got my ASMR people that I follow.
Do you?
Oh yeah.
See, I'm learning something every day, man.
Come on, man. You didn't know that about me? I'm not into the mouth noises, really.
Oh God, this stuff's awful.
But certain voices there's a thing there. But
that chewing hand thing, that's not going to happen. No. It's just awful.
Biting
now, if
hair.
Blanco Lirio read books, I would absolutely listen to those books.
Oh yeah, man. He's got a crispy voice. I like his voice.
Pretty good, man.
He's awesome. We thank you for your support.
Absolutely. And if you guys like airplane disaster videos as much as Eric and I do, please follow the Blanco Lirio channel. It's pretty amazing.
We'll see you here. He's got the best outro. I love that, man. Very,
it really does.
Very, very military.
It's pretty great.
There. Yeah. Okay. So, hey, you got to review our podcast. We need to start getting more reviews on our podcast. Please.
Please. It really helps. We're moving up. We're moving up the rankings. I don't even share that with Eric, what our rankings are.
Oh,
but
really?
We've been moving up.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
That's
but we're not in the top 100 yet. We really want to be in that top 100. Oh, dude, there's thousands and thousands of podcasts in our category.
Oh God, there's no way we're gonna get in the top 100. Oh, well.
We are. We're getting closer every day.
All right, but reviews help. Please help us by writing a review on your favorite podcast app. Really helps us.
Please do it. Thank you very much.
All right, Chief.
Hey.
Good chatting.
It was great, as always.
Be
well.
Yeah, I can't wait to start making my retirement paycheck.
Yes. Everybody here is waiting for you to plant a flag in the sand and say when it's going to be. Just not going to tell us.
And then we're going to quit the show.